To welcome you to APCUG's Wednesday workshop, a 2-hour time when we get the in-depth activities and learning. We've had a very successful one for almost a year now, and we really enjoy it, and the people seem to enjoy it too. Today we are in our 7th, I think, Learning Linux workshop, trying to share what some of us know and like about Linux to other people. And so today we're going to be doing desktop customization. We've talked about different desktops, we've talked about different distros, we've talked about different this and that. And so today we thought what we'd show you is different ways that you can customize a desktop in Linux, maybe more so than you can in Windows, to really make it personal, functional, pleasing, I guess is even the word. So today we're going to be doing 4 different desktops with 4 different people. We have 2 new presenters with us today, so I want to introduce those 2 people, and they will be with you in a little bit. Murray Strome is going to be here, and Murray obtained his BA in Science and his MA in Science and Engineering Physics from the Universities of Alberta and British Columbia, respectively, and his PhD in Electrical Engineering, focusing on artificial intelligence from Carnegie Mellon University. He began his adventures with computers in '59, programming in machine language. He designed and built complex hardware computer systems, for example, FFT processor, wrote programs for mathematical and scientific research, micro-coded computers to produce new instruction sets, developed computer emulators, cross-assemblers, and real-time operating systems. He is probably best known for his designing and supervising the construction of Canada's first system to download, process, and analyze image data from the first Landsat and subsequent Earth observation satellite systems. He is one of the founders of the Canadian Centre for Remote Sensing. Murray has been using various forms of Unix, BSD, and Linux since '84, and he's active in the Vancouver's Linux, Raspberry Pi, and Genealogy organizations. Our other presenter, who is going to be here via recording, is David Hutton, or Hatton, and he is from Melbourne, Australia, as I mentioned. He completed a diploma in applied physics at the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology back in '72, and completed a diploma in computer applications at Charles Sturt University in 1990. From 1986 to the end of the century, David held various full-time positions providing computer programming and related support services in DEC PDP-11 and DEC VAC and Data General Unix environments. He retired back in 2000. He began volunteering in 2005 to convene the Northern Suburbs Linux Interest Group, NISLIG, as part of the Melbourne PC user group, which is MELBPC. He currently is contributing to the NESLIG and the web development groups at Melbourne PC. So he'll be joining us by video later. Today we're going to be doing 4 different desktop environments and customizing. Murray is going to do Xfce. David is going to be doing Mate. I will be presenting Cinnamon, and then Orv, who doesn't need introduction, he's been with us all the time, will be doing the KDE desktop. So at this time, I'm going to turn things over to Murray, and we will start our desktop customization.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm going to try sharing my screen.
Could I just step in for a moment and say, don't forget to turn off your video, participants. We can see everything you're doing. I don't know if you realize that. And if you get up and leave your screen, I would be ever in your debt if you would stop your video. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to try this, be a new presenter on this series. First of all, I would like to start by sharing my screen and my. Okay, can everybody see that okay?
Yes, they can.
Oh, I'm having trouble. I can't hear anybody now. You seeing it?
Yes, they are.
Is that okay? Just a minute. Okay, and you can hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for that introduction. I'm really pleased to be able to have a chance to show this presentation to you. I'm going to start out. Well, I've tried different desktop environments over the years. I've tried lots of different Linux distributions, and I've sort of settled on Ubuntu over the last little while, or at least some variation of Debian. And already you've heard some of the things that I've done in terms of my background, but I thought I would start off by talking about why should I consider using Xfce. Now on there, and I will put these links in the chat and in the handout later on, are some links as to some of the reasons why other people have thought that it was an environment to consider. Now, it is one of the oldest environments, GUI-based environments. It started in 1996, which is only 5 years after the first version of Linux 1 was released. It's got quite a few distinctive features, but the ones that stand out the most are its lightweight nature, simplicity, and performance. It doesn't use too many resources, and it performs well with older computers with limited RAM and slower speeds. I tend to use it on my notebooks and laptops. I may use other ones on on the desktop computers, but I found that for laptops and netbooks, especially the older ones, this really works quite well. It's also very flexible. I should mention, though, that the lightweight nature of it is what makes it especially suitable for older computers. Now, not the oldest ones. There are lighter weight desktop environments, but I found that this is much better as far as providing the capabilities that I want. Some of the lighter weight ones I find are just too limited. Okay, now simple doesn't really mean limited or minimal. It just means that it's easy to get things done. In particular, its settings manager is probably the best among all of the desktop environments. It's straightforward, well organized. All components of Xfce are well structured, which makes it easy to find what you want in order to customize your desktop experience. Its structure is entirely modular. Most of all the elements of the system are separate, which makes it much more configurable than in most of the other environments, where they sort of tend to fuse things together. The settings of all the components are brought together in the settings manager to provide a unified interface for ease, also making it highly customizable. And there are, if the resources to make and look and feel like you want, like you wish, you aren't there right away, there are all kinds of other things that you can do to change the backgrounds, themes, and you can even make your own. It's very stable. The release cycle on it is quite long, and they really test things out pretty carefully before they commit the new version. And all the components seem to work together to provide a really smooth experience for the users. Okay, so I'll talk about some of the panels, plugins, and integration and so on a little bit later. Okay, but before I do, I just let you know that what I did here, let's see, why is it going to the next slide? Should go to the next slide. Oh, next, maybe do that. Okay, so for example, I decided that in order to show, in order not to be sort of cluttered up by all the things that I've already done, I actually took an old laptop, my Toshiba laptop, which is, I'm not, probably 10 or 15, at least 10 or 15 years old. It's not very powerful. It's a dual core Intel 1.6 gigahertz. Doesn't have very much RAM. I think it's got three gigabytes of RAM. And so it's a fairly old laptop, but I actually took out the hard drive that I was using in it, put in an old one I wasn't using, and did a completely fresh install. Okay. Now, when you first boot up, and it doesn't take very long to boot up the system, this is the desktop that it looks like. That's sort of the default as you start. And if you'll notice up here, there's when you first boot it up after you started it, it will come up with a taskbar at the top, or a panel as it's called. And one of the only thing that'll show up on there besides a few of these icons over the right-hand side is Software Updater. Now that Software Updater will appear there if, when you did the installation, you chose the option to install the updates as you were doing the install. When you click on that, it will just say your system is up to date. Okay, I'm just going to quickly run through the menu items. This is when you click on that little button, that little blue button in the upper, in the upper left-hand corner, you'll come up with this menu. And it starts out, this is sort of the starting point, and you'll see there's a whole bunch of categories there. I'm going to skip the recently used in all applications and just run through these very quickly. I'm not going to go into any details because other workshops have focused on the software, but just to show you what's there when you do a fresh, clean install. And by the way, this happens to be Xubuntu 20.04. I chose it because it's long-term support, and coincidentally, just for your information, the newest version of Ubuntu will be coming out tomorrow, but it's not long-term support. 20.04 is long-term support, and it will be supported, I think, until 2025, I believe. So anyway, not much in education. I don't usually do much with games, but there's what's installed to start with. There's a little bit of graphics, not very much. Main one that's most important for me is the GIMP. Internet, the default browser is Firefox. The default email is Thunderbird. And I don't even know what cheese is, but this is the things in the multimedia. Again, pretty limited. Not too much is installed off the bat. The main thing in Microsoft Office is LibreOffice, the full suite, which is installed under the Office applications. And you notice that the math appeared also in education, and draw appeared under graphics, I think it was. Okay, I'm going to skip settings for just a second and just show you what it shows up in system. But I don't, but I'm going to go back to settings now, because this is where we're going to really concentrate, and there are a lot of them. And in fact, I have to do it in 3 sections because I couldn't show the whole panel all at once. So this is, those are all the settings that you have. Okay, now, before I get into the desktop background and so on, I wanted to do one. I always do this one setting first, and that is I go to the settings, and it says Customize Desktop Startup, and I go to the Advanced tab on that, and I make sure that these 2 buttons are checked, which is launching the GNOME and the KDE services. And the reason that I do that is that I want to make sure that if I install some of my favorite KDE or GNOME applications, they will work pretty smoothly. And some of the examples, for example, in KDE, I happen to like Conqueror, It can double as a web browser and a file manager. I just happen to like it, and I'm used to it. And then coupled with that, I use Kfind. Then there's also, I like the K3B DVD disk burning software. GNOME, I particularly like the GNOME disk utility, and I also use I like gparted and gedit. I don't think gedit is any particularly better than others. It's just I'm kind of used to it. And also, as far as GNOME is concerned, also I usually install the Synaptic Package Manager just because I find it easier to use than the software center that is supplied or using the command line to install software. Okay, then the next thing that I customize, and I do this almost the first thing right off the bat, and with any desktop environment, and I have to say that some of the desktop environments, I find it difficult to find this, but on Xfce, it's very easy. You just go to the settings, the workspaces, and I usually change that to 4 on a laptop or a netbook, but I will change it to 6 on my desktop system, which has lots of memory and lots of capacity. I don't really need. I just sort of have the habit of doing that. Now, one of the things that you can do, which I don't usually bother with, but you can actually name each of those desktops something different. And I've just, for the purposes of this demo, named them browser, because I normally have my browser and my email in my Workspace 1 and terminal, because in Workspace 2, just out of habit, I usually have a terminal open in Workspace 2. In Workspace 3, I usually have the file manager, and I usually have Conquer, and I usually have about 3 or 4 different ones open there, that because I'm usually copying things from one section to another, especially from my network. And so I basically put my file manager in there. I just call the 4th one editing, sort of other stuff that I put in there, my Word documents or my presentations or whatever it is that I'm doing. Okay, so now if I look at my, if I want to customize my desktop, there's lots of things that I can do. First of all, I can, coming with Xfce, just as it comes out of the box, there's a number of backgrounds that you can choose from. Not very many, not too many exciting, although I do happen to like this particular one, and very often I'll just pick that just because I happen to like it. But you can pick anything you want. You can pick any photograph that you have. You can load up lots more. Oh, I should have just mentioned that happens to be under a section. If you click on this folder, you can pick a folder wherever you want to get your pictures from. The default is this backdrops, and then but you can take your pictures from anywhere on your system, or download them from the internet, or just put up whatever you like. Okay, the width of panel can be changed. Panel is that thing at the top when it starts out. You can make it bigger. You can add widgets, whatever you want. You can add as many panels as you wish, and of course the default one is on the top of the screen. Other configurations are given in the settings, such as opacity, icon size adjustment, and all of that. Now, I just showed here, for example, this is the I've just customized the top menu a little bit. I usually leave it there, or sometimes I'll put it down on the bottom. But just for the demonstration here, oops. What did they do? Okay, for the demonstration, I added a few widgets here. I've added the system performance. I've added, oh, why does it do this? Then I've got the volume control. And then I have the CPU performance. I have the weather application, the trash folder, and the menu button down at the bottom. And I could put that anywhere on the screen I wanted. And as I said, you can have as many of those as you want. Now, if you're still not happy with all that you can do with all of this stuff, well, there's all kinds of things you can get at a place called Pling, P-L-I-N-G, and they literally have hundreds of customized themes that already made up that you can use. For example, I just picked this one just to illustrate it, and I wouldn't really do this, but if I wanted it to look like a Mac, I can go and get this particular theme, and if the link I'll be supplying to you, and down here is the a link to a step-by-step video that shows how you can install this application on your computer. And this is the final result. And if you're into Macs, you'll see that this is this is a typical way that a Mac would look using Big Sur. And if I go back here and you look at this, you'll see that, you'll see that for the Apple menus, they have a whole selection here. They have Big Sur, which I think is the current operating system, Catalina, Mac OS, Mojave, and in addition to this, they have pre-made ones for just about every version of Windows that you can think of, plus literally hundreds more. Okay, so that's the final result of that. Okay, I'm going to leave my presentation and hope that I still have, I'm going to just close this down. Hope that I'm still sharing here. So for example, right now, and I just make sure that it still looks okay. Yeah, okay, so here we have the menu bar, and as I said, you can change it any way you like. For example, one other thing I want to show you. If you right click, see on here, yeah, you'll notice that if you just right click on the menu bar, you'll on the anywhere in the blank area of your screen, it'll come up with things like a whole bunch of things that you can do. You can create a URL link, create a folder, create documents, and from the documents you can open a document spreadsheet, open document text, plain text, empty file. You can open a terminal. I already have a terminal open there. You can find in this folder, actually, because this is the desktop, it's the desktop folder, and properties. And here you can get to your applications menu, and you can see all of your various applications that you can show there. Let me go back here. The touchpad on this machine is rather sensitive. So you have all of these different things. You could go to your settings manager if you wanted. You can log out, just whatever. And as far as the applications are concerned. Now, I should have mentioned that for your menu button here, one of the things you can do if there's something that you want to check on, for example, you can just start typing something like, let me just try this. Let's try. If you start typing draw, then you can come up with LibreOffice Draw, and you come up with that. Or anything that you want, any of your applications that you want, you can check with that. Oh, Okay, I think with that, I'm not sure how I'm doing on time, but I think I'll stop sharing my screen and come back to myself.
Hello everyone, I'm David Hatton, the convener of the Northern Suburbs Linux Special Interest Group. Our group is part of the Melbourne PC user group here in Melbourne, Australia. First, I'd like to apologise for not joining you in real time today, but the realities of geography dictate that when you're running your workshop sessions, it's around 3 o'clock in the morning here. I don't really make much sense at 3 a.m. in the morning, so I've prepared a video instead. I'd like to thank John Kennedy for his assistance in preparing this video. Very valuable. I've been using various Linux distros as my daily driver for around 20 years now, and I've found Linux to be very usable and reliable. So, with the preliminaries done, let's take a look at the Kde desktop. So we're here with a new account, and the distro we're running is Linux Mint, and the desktop is Kde. And because I'm using a moderately high definition monitor, I've adjusted the text size to be a little larger than normal and the bottom panel to be a light grey background. Both of these hopefully will make it a little easier for you to read. So let's have a look at changing the Linux Mint background. We right click on anywhere on the background, select change desktop background, and we've got a number of backgrounds supplied as standard. So if we'd like one, we can just click on it, and there we have a new background. If we'd like to use a favorite image that we have, we can place it anywhere in the home directory. The usual place is the pictures directory, and we can use the add function of the appearance preferences to add a new image to the background. And we have our favorite image as a background. Now, if you want to tune the theme a little more, you can bring up the theme tab and select customize, and you can customize controls, window borders, the icons, and the pointer. So there's plenty of scope to change some of the little details which you might like to update. So now let's turn our attention to the bottom panel. And specifically, we would like to see what options we have with the menus. Now, the standard menu is a menu which looks quite a bit like the cinnamon menu, and that's fine if you're used to that. If you'd like to change that, we right click on the panel and add to panel, and one of the options we have is a classic menu. So if we click on add, it comes down to the bottom panel, And if we see what's there, we can see that there are applications in one tab, places in another, and system, that is system administration, on the third tab. So there are 3 sets of menus on different tabs sorted by category. If you'd like something else, there's the compact menu, and if we have a look and see what's in the compact menu, we can see a traditional flyout menu, with administration, preferences as a third level, but all in the one menu. So let's put a compact menu in to replace the previous default menu. Before we start moving things about, however, let's increase the size of the bottom panel. And if we click on properties, we can increase the height, and 35 seems a good move. That'll give us a little bit more room. If we now look at the options that we have, we can see there's a lock to panel and a move option. If we have a look at the Linux Mint standard menu, we can remove it, and with a bit of luck we can move the compact menu into place and lock to the panel. We can now remove the standard menu, and we have replaced the default menu with the compact menu. The largest part of the default bottom panel is taken up with what's called a window list, and we can see this in action if we start up some applications. Every application we start up creates a button on the window list. So that we can switch from one to other by simply clicking on the appropriate button. Now, what we'd like to do with the bottom panel is to configure it so there are more icons along the bottom, because there are a number of applications we would like to have quick and easy access to. So we can put a window list on another panel, and we can create another panel simply by right-clicking on the panel and selecting New Panel. Now, by default, the new panel appears at the top of the screen. If we click on that new panel and select Properties, we can change the orientation to left or right, and of course we can change the size. But in this case, we're going to stick with the top panel. You can also have what are called hide buttons. If we click on the show hide buttons, we can see at the top we've got a little button, and when we click on it, the panel disappears. This is to give you a bit more vertical space if you need it. And of course you can do the same thing with the bottom panel. So let's just close that for a moment and remove the window list from the panel. We can now start adding things in place of the original window list on the bottom panel. And there are two items I generally add. One is a workspace switcher, and the other is a system monitor. So let's have a look at those. Workspace switcher, we add to the panel, and system monitor, add to the panel. Close out and lock in place. So let's have a look at the preferences of the system monitor first. Right click and open preferences, and let's select items we would like to monitor. I generally select everything except the load, because the load is more or less a amalgamation of the other particular items. I also like to reduce the monitor width to 20 pixels and reduce the monitor update interval, or increase the monitor update interval to 1 second instead of half a second. Close. And here we have our monitor chugging away quite nicely. And we can see by simply hovering the cursor over each item what's going on. Not terribly much at the moment. So let's move on to the workspace. And selecting preferences, essentially you can vary the number of rows which display the workspaces and the number of workspaces themselves. Default is 4, but you can increase that up to any sensible number of workspaces. I think the limit is 64, but I stand to be corrected on that. If you've got a lot of workspaces, you might want to increase the number of rows to reduce the actual area in which they appear on the panel. Let's set things back to 4 and 1, which is a pretty useful configuration. To finish setting up our bottom panel, we'd like to add some more icons for applications. So we can select the applications we'd like to add to the bottom panel, say Libreoffice Writer. If we right click on that, we get an option, add this launcher to panel, and there it is. If we now select the move option, we can move it along and lock it to the panel. Fast forward a little to the end of our adding icons process, and this is what we have on the bottom panel. A set of icons, hopefully organized by category and grouped in relative same category. Right click on the window list preferences, which can be a little tricky to get exactly the right point, However, we have Windows list preferences, and I like to show windows from all workspaces. I generally hide thumbnails on hover. Group windows when space is limited, so the space can be used up, but once it starts to get a bit crowded, it groups the windows together. And restore to native workspace. Now, if you're using this particular item, you'll probably discover your own preferences. Close that up, and now we're ready to go. Let's start with launching LibreOffice. Let's say we're going to create a document, and in the creation of that document we will want to reference the internet. Switching to a third workspace, we might want to add some images. Now we can switch between those three items by simply clicking on their button on the Windows list. So it makes, particularly for laptops with small screens, it makes a lot of sense to use workspaces so you can get a good size window on your application and readily switch between them. When you've finished with your applications, you can close them from the window list button. And now you can see all is clear. There's no application running. Another configuration you might like to look at is the configuration of the file manager, which is called PCUG in the Kde Desktop. And this is a default setting for your file manager. Clicking Edit Preferences, and there's quite a few there. Generally, you probably only change a few items. I like a list view, behavior is pretty much standard. Display, I like a date format which is a little more compact. List columns, I like for each file to know the owner, the permissions and the group, and I like to change the order in which these are displayed. Preview, pretty much leave as is. Media, I like to see the media which is loaded, but I don't particularly want the system to guess what I want to do with it. And the extensions I generally leave as is. So now if we go to the file system, we can see that it's in a list view. We have the date modified, permissions, owner and a group. If we go to the home directory, similarly we can see all the details of the files that we want. So that's a quick rundown on setting the file manager. As you use it, you may well want to make some changes to those preferences. The other thing that is of interest with the file manager is what's called the dual pane mode. And if we press F3, we get another pane. So let's go down into pictures and let's right click and create folder. Just call that temp. Double click to bring that up. Click on the first pane, type Control A to select all the files. Right click, copy to other pane, and we're done. Dual pane facilities can be very useful at times when you want to create copies of files, a number of files in a different directory. So that's another feature of the file manager. Let's now take a look at the control center. Control center is reached through the menu as System Control Center. Now, many of the settings we have used so far are also available in the Control Center. If you can't quickly find a setting, or if you would just like to check what tweaks are available, Control Center is where you go. For example, let's have a look at screensaver preferences. By default, it's fairly minimal after 10 minutes. Seeing we're running on a desktop system, we can increase that to, let's say, 40 minutes. And we don't need to lock the screen when screensaver is active. Screensaver by default will have a random blank screen, but there are all sorts of other interesting patterns available. Another setting is, particularly for laptops, is in the mouse settings. Seeing we are running on a desktop without a touchpad, the touchpad tab is missing. But if you're on a laptop, you'll have a touchpad tab here, and you can turn the touchpad off. This is handy for some laptops that exhibit a very sensitive touchpad, to the extent that when you're typing, the touchpad has an intermittent activation. That can drive you up the wall, so to avoid that situation, turn the touchpad off. Another interesting item is a login window. It needs a password for an administrative user. And here we can set whether there is a user list or not, whether or not or not a manual login is permitted. And if you have an automatic login, you can set the parameters of that automatic login. There are a few other items, appearance and settings, which you can also tune the login window to your particular hardware. So that's the control center. There's a lot of configuration available there, and you can pursue that at your leisure. Well, that's about all I intend to cover today. In summary, my impression of the Kde Desktop is one of the basics done well, with a few extra goodies thrown in. It doesn't take very long to set up for your preferences and your workflow, and then it gets out of your way and lets you get on with actually using it. I hope this video has encouraged you to give it a go and see how it suits your particular circumstances.
I thank David in a few more hours after he gets up for his presentation. I'm switching now to the same Linux Mint that he was using. Today we're using a variety, both Murray and I think Orv are using Ubuntu, and I'm going to be using what he did called Mate, but just with a different desktop. The desktop for both Mate and for Cinnamon both come from the same original GNOME Desktop 2. And that's the one that started many years ago. And when the developers decided to go a whole different route, there were two different teams of people that said, we don't like what they're doing. And so one team took GNOME 2 and created Mate, and the other team created the Cinnamon desktop. Okay, I know what to do to fix that. Sorry, I had to do the video optimize for that. There we go. Thanks for that, Orv. That was a Zoom thing. We had it optimized for the video, and now we're back. Thanks. So the these are two cousins. What the team for Cinnamon did was want to create something that was very Windows-like to make it very easy for Windows people to come over. I'm not a Cinnamon user. I tried to get somebody to do the GNOME desktop, which is one of the original, which is the newest version. And I searched the country wide, clear into Australia, and could get neither GNOME or the Cinnamon desktop to be demonstrated by somebody who uses it. Either there's somebody who would demonstrate, doesn't use it, or somebody who doesn't want to demonstrate. So I wanted to make sure that we saw this, because this is one of the very popular ones, and it's being copied by a number of other videos as well, or as distros as well. So I'm going to be sharing with you what I've learned about Cinnamon, and maybe we have somebody who's online that has been using it quite extensively that can fill in and add some more later. One of the big nice things about Linux Mint is they have a welcome center. And when you go to the welcome center, they give you a first steps. And one of the first steps that you can do when you want to use Cinnamon is change the color of the desktop, meaning mostly the icons and folders. Mint has a greenish mint tradition or default, but as you can see, you can pick any of the colors that you so choose. I'm a bluish person, so I'm going to pick the blue, and you can see that my icons have turned to blue. Also, you have the option to switch from a light theme to a dark theme. I have become somebody who, with my eyesight, the dark theme is what makes it easier for me to read. The other thing that is different about Cinnamon is that they offer two different kinds of layouts for these panels. The default one is what they call the modern one. And if you look at the icons across the top of my bottom panel, they are kind of somewhat large. The traditional one, when you switch, makes it smaller. And for me, not. Also, you can notice that as in David's presentation, you can see the window list has the icon and the name for the program or window that is running. So right now I've got the welcome. If I go back to the modern one, it's similar to what you would see, in Windows, where the icon is there, but not the naming. But when you hover over it, you see what you have there underneath. So those are two things that you can change, right away when you do that. One thing that might make a decision for you, and of course that can be changed later, is that when you have the traditional, you have a user icon down here at the right. And when you click on the user icon, there's where you have your controls for logging out, screen, go to your settings, something like that. But interesting, for some reason, when they created the modern one, they removed that for this. Okay, every time you change the layout, it tells you got to check your drivers. This is running in a virtual machine because since I'm running Zoom, I can't change to a different user. All right, so those are the main two. Now, what else they also do in here is they give you ideas on what you should do for a new user, talking about setting up a snapshot, check your drivers, update your computer, go to the settings, check your software manager, and set your firewall. So this is very user oriented, very helpful on what you can do to get started. All right, so I'm going to leave it with the more modern icons at the bottom. Now, first off, though, I'm getting older and things are getting small. When I click on the menu, things get a little bit small, harder to read. So one of the first things I do is I go into the menu, and this menu that Cinnamon has is kind of a Windowsy type menu, kind of an in-between between the Mate one that had 3 sections and the Xfce that was pretty much one. On the side panel, you get a place for shortcuts for places and the tools such as the shutdown and logging out. And then you have your categories for your different programs. And this one's set by choice for when you hover, it pops open. And just like with the Xfce and the Mate, when you go to a category, there's the programs that are in there. So I want to go to settings. And then I'm going to go to font selection. And what's really nice here is you've got two ways you can do some changes to how appearance looks. You can go through and change all of these different font categories, you know, your default font, desktop, you know, to documents, and change it. And you can see that it's set up for 10. And I don't know who can read 10 at this age, but so I can go through and just increase it to something I can read. And you can see the default now automatically is big enough that I can read. So you can go and do that for all of those that you want to choose. Now, the other way that's kind of interesting is you can do sort of like you're magnifying the scaling, just like in Windows. So I can just overall magnify the whole, that's too much, the whole desktop area and be able to read things better by just scaling it. I prefer to do it with the font sizes. So I'm going to go back and then I'm going to change everything up. And of course, you see that you can go ahead and go and change all the different default fonts that you want, but I'm not going to take time because that's something we've all done. This way, hopefully you'll be able to see things a lot better as well. Okay, so that's the fonts. Now things can be read a lot easier. Another thing that we talked about before is the themes. Now, originally I was able to pick the blue or whatever color I wanted, but if we also go into the settings and we go to themes, one of the things that Cinnamon does, and Linux in general, gives you a lot of choices to create your own personal themes. And these are the different parts of what you can change. And normally you just be able to pick a theme that changed everything at once. But Cinnamon lets you change each individual. Now you can add and remove. You can see right now, because I haven't got mine. So I'm going to go ahead and say, let's set this up because this is a brand new user. And it's going to give me themes that have been designed that I can pick from. Here it comes. You only have to do this really once and then it keeps updated. Running in a virtual machine does make things slower. Okay, and so then you get all these different themes that have been created, and then you can pick. This one seemed to be a very, very popular one, so I'm going to add that to my choices. And then when I go back to my themes, I can click on any of these subcategories. And now there's that one I just got. Before I had 3 choices, and now I've got a 4th choice. And rather than be required to be using a theme that covers everything, I can pick and choose what I want. And so always now we're getting things with both light versions and dark versions. So there are the whole set of icons that you can have, colors. You saw that in the beginning, it gave me a few choices. And again, I like the dark blue. Your control buttons, you can even choose to have a separate different color for that. I'm going to go with a, just for fun, dark pink. You can change your mouse arrows. And even your desktop can have its own special choice for how it's set up. And I'm going to go with a mint sand. You also have a few other settings, and you can see now how my buttons have gone to that kind of a pink look. But this is really nice because you can really put things in the category how you like it. Some people think that Linux is nerve-wracking because there are so many choices, but that's what the beauty of Linux is. You always have choices. I'm going to show you real quick down here at the bottom because I've got my update manager has popped up and says I've got some updates. And so that's what happens. Just, you know, it pops up and tells me I've got updates. But in Linux, it won't do anything until I say, you know, install them. And so there are 3 right here. I'm not going to take the time to do it right now, but that's what you see. And it just pops right up there. Okay, themes. All right, backgrounds. We have 2 choices. I can do a right click and change the desktop background, or I can go to my settings and background. With Mint, they give you a lot of subfolders for your backgrounds and divided among, these are the default Mint ones. And then these are the last 2 updates, and they're different pictures. So evidently they collect different pictures and just add them. So if you were on an older Mint and you had a background that you really liked, you can still go back and get it even if you're running the newest Mint. And of course, just like David said, you go to pictures and you can go to your picture folder and grab anything that you want to add to that. I'm going to pick, see what's in there. Oh, Big Sur. Okay. And then under settings, if you want to pick a folder, so for example, if I pick this Lisa, then I can turn on and it will cycle through all those pictures in there. That's not much different than what we can do in Windows, but you just have a bunch. So there's the background that you can choose. Now, one of the other things that I do is I move my panels around. And one of the things that for me and Vision, I have gotten used to, I like it better to have my main panel at the top so I can see it with my upper part of my glasses, because sometimes when you have it at the bottom, you can't see it down there. And so I usually oh, I got to unlock it and going to move it. As you can see here, just like with the others, I can put my panel on any side that I want. And so I'm going to pick the top one and move it up to there. You can already also have it set up that you can always show it, or you can hide it until you move up, or it does intelligent hiding. But I'm going to always have it show right now. And again, you can change the height depending on how big of the icons you want. And then you can also set the center, left, and right to be a little bit different. And so if you want icons larger, I want the left ones larger. Are you going to get bigger? Oh, can't do it because it is set to scale automatically. So I can change the size of those icons. So there's a lot you can do to your panel. And then you can also add more panels. And if you want to, you can add a panel at the bottom or on the sides. Now, in the version of Xfce that I use with my distro, my panels are on the left and the right side, because I've learned that monitors are wider, so you have more space that way. So remove the panels from the top and the bottom, and then you have more room. I liked what the Mate did by adding the hide button, so you can hide a panel when you don't want it without the problem. My problem with it disappearing is I always get my mouse up in the corners where it makes it go away. So I'm going to add a panel over on there. So now I have two sets of controls. Previous panel will control the top, and next panel will do the side. All right, so now, as a very odd one, I've got two panels on both sides. The panels have what we call applets in Cinnamon. And that was the same thing that David was adding, although they didn't call it applets, but that's something that we do here. And if you right click, and you can see that on the panel settings, we have applets. Now, notice I need to turn on the editing mode so that I can do things. And there's a little green box that pops up, so I know. So I can go and add applets. And I'm going to do, let's see, I'm going to add the same thing that he did, Workspace Switcher. So I'm going to add that. And now it's down there. Oh, I want the trash can added. The window list is up at the top. You can add spacers and bars to move them out. See what else I want to add. Now you can see up at the top that there are a number of new applets that are up there that I didn't add, but they automatically got added. And there's one for the printer, and I can go to the next panel. There we go. And I can put a printer on that one too. Let me go back down here and get my Workspace switchers back. Okay. So, you know, you have a whole bunch of options that you can do it. Oh, Workspace Switcher, you went to the top. Get off of there. Remove that one. And now I want to go to that one and add amp. You put it in the top again. There we go, highlighted in red. Now, if I go to the Workspace Manager, I can do there we go. Why are you hiding down there? My workspaces are all down there, as you can see. And you do the same thing, you know, that David was showing you, and Murray, that workspaces are really helpful for that. So again, you know, you can go on here, turn off my editing. Oh, that's why. There we go. So there's my trash can and there's my workspaces. And again, I could label those. And I do the same thing that David was. I put different things, you know, usually in a habit of where my emails run or where the terminal would be, and I can do it that way. Now, the next step that you can do on a Cinnamon is that you can add Desklets. And these are things that you can add on the top of of your desktop. Reminds me of what you could do way back with the Vista days in Windows. So I'm going to go again and ask to get more choices, so you get an idea of what kinds of things you can do to customize your Cinnamon desktop. And again, you only have to do this once. And so I'm going to add the weather to my choice. If I wanted to, I could add the Google Calendar. So I would have that on my desktop telling me. Your laptop, you might want to know that one. KDE Connect Desklet. Murray was talking about how he wants to add the GNOME into KDE. One thing that KDE has is a fantastic thing that you can connect your smartphones right to your computer with ease. Okay, so then I can go onto here and say, I'm going to put my desktop frame on there, and I'm going to do the weather Desklet up here. And you can put them where you want. Now with the weather one, I need to configure it. And I finally figured out how to do that. I had to go to their website and find my location. And change it to what I read, Fahrenheit, and for days. All right, and so I don't know what the area is there. I'll have to figure it out, but you can see that now I have a Desklet on my desk for the weather, and this one would be a folder. Let's see. Since I don't have any pictures on a virtual, it won't show up, but if I could find the bookmarks. I think it's down in user. Must be backgrounds. Okay, well, skip it. But I just go to whatever folder I had pictures in, and then I could set it to shuffle if I wanted to, or just go through them. And as you saw, there's a whole bunch of other different kinds of Desklets you can do. You can also, as always, remove any of the icons on your desktop that you didn't want, or add a few others. But there's one last thing to show you, is that in Cinnamon, they also have what they call hotspots. And under the selection, just to go quickly, you can see all the different options you have under the settings. They group them by the appearance, your preferences, and there's your panel, window tiling if you want to do it, screensaver. Screensaver doesn't have as much as the Mate one did, because they're kind of going out, but you can still have one if you need it. So let's go to what I think is neat with hot corners. You have 4 corners and you can put something in each of them. I'm going to use the bottom one since there's nothing down there, because up here at the top, when I have them, I usually move over these icons out of the way so I can get to the top corner. But I'm going to enable the bottom corner, and I'm going to do it for workspaces. And now you know that I've got 5 workspaces, and I've got that workspace thing on the side. But if I just use my mouse and go down the corner, up pops all my workspaces, and I can switch back and forth between those that easy and see what's going on. Don't know that if it makes that much difference in here, except I need to know what's there. And so that really makes it customizable for your work. I can add more. I didn't try on that. See how many. So I'll go back to 1. Let me see if there's anything else that I wanted to really show. As I said, you know, I'm not a Cinnamon user, but I wanted everybody to see it because of this menu system and way. This one is supposed to be the one that if you had somebody coming from Windows, a lot of people recommend coming to Cinnamon. And different distros now have the Cinnamon because of its ability. You can add more to here, just like you did before, and go writer and say add to my favorites. And now writer should be it's supposed to be added into here. Go back again. I can add it to the panel at the top. It's in my favorites, but my favorites isn't big enough to show it all. So I'll add it to the panel up at the top. You can see it there. You have to increase the size of your menu. And then you can come in here and you can customize your menu to show exactly what you want to see, how big it wants to be. If I go to the menu editor, here are all the categories that are available. And so I can show which ones. Since I don't use a lot with universal access, I can not show that. I do not do anything with programming, and let's say take off education. So now when I close that, those categories are now gone from my menu. So you can really customize the menu, the desktop, the panels. Linux is just great. So I think I'm going to stop there because I want to be able to get plenty of time for Orv to share KDE, which is like the original, one of the very, very, very first desktops, and it's gone through a lot of changes. So at this time, I'm going to turn things over to Orv so he can share with you KDE.
All right, hear me, John?
I hear you.
All right, let's see what we can do here. You see my desktop, John?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Thanks to APCUG for letting me participate here. Been using Linux for, I don't know, 25 years now. I settled on what was back then called the KDE desktop interface because even at version 1.0, and this was back when Linux was far less sophisticated than it is now, I could see that it had potential for being an everyday desktop. Stayed with it from 1.0 clear up to, I don't know, it's Plasma now, 5 point something. I'm currently running Kubuntu, which is Ubuntu with the default KDE Plasma desktop interface. And we've mentioned in the past that no matter which Linux distribution you're using, you can add a different DE desktop environment through your software manager and pick which one you want upon login. This is not a new Linux installation. This is my standard everyday desktop, but I'm logged in as a new user with username new user. So this is what you would see in a standard Kubuntu installation upon startup. And the previous presenters have gone over all the features that Plasma has. I'm not going to reiterate too many of them. And I'll explore some KDE mini applications that I find really, really useful. By default, the panel is at the bottom. And as John mentioned, having them on the sides gives you more vertical space. And that reminded me, I read an article recently. A number of years ago, they switched from the 4:3 format, 800 by 600, 1280 by 1024, to the 16 by 9 format, starting with 1920 by 1080, because they figured everybody would be watching movies on their computers, and that's the format that TV and movies use for the most part. Well, it turns out that's not true, and I read recently that monitor manufacturers are starting to provide more 4:3 format machines. Obviously, if you're like me, you do a lot of editing and documents and stuff, and more vertical space is more precious than more horizontal space. So I have a 16 by 9 on my screen, on my desktop, and I have a older HP 4:3 as a secondary screen. And you can't have too much screen space on your desk. I'm sure you've all realized that. So anyway, I do put my default panel on the left-hand side. Oh, one more thing I wanted to mention. Some monitors have the capability of rotating into the portrait mode, and KDE Plasma will accommodate that very nicely. A couple of 16 by 9 screens on your desk rotated vertically makes a wonderful working environment. And one day I hope to be able to afford that.
Or just so you know, we don't see the panel on the left.
I haven't put it there yet.
Ah, okay.
That
you
was
keep
my
talking
panel.
about it there.
This
Okay.
this is the new user default. See, on your left, by default, you have a launcher, and by default, it has favorites with some default favorites in it, your applications menus, and with a search bar on the top.
Okay,
Computer.
I need to say, all we see is the one geometric shaped desktop, nothing on it at all.
Then let me stop sharing. How do I stop sharing here? Help, help.
I can stop you from sharing.
Yeah, stop me from sharing. Okay, good. Let me share a different screen.
That'll work.
All right. You see the pop-up menu?
Nope.
What's up with that? Okay, kill off my sharing again. This is going to be a very short presentation if I can't figure this out.
It's a Zoom problem, not a Linux.
Let's try this one. You see the pop-up menu?
No. So like an eye doctor appointment, which is better, 1 or 2, but nope.
Well, neither one of them. So all you see is the menu, huh?
No, just the background. Unless somebody else is seeing something that I don't see.
Well, okay, I think this is
Now
gonna
we got it. I see.
okay, good.
Yep.
All right, where was I? Okay, this is the launcher down in the lower left. The GNOME community likes to keep things sparse. They think they know they're wiser as far as defaults than their user community. So at least in the past, it used to be kind of difficult to customize a GNOME desktop. KDE went the other way. They never meant a submenu they didn't like. It's highly configurable. They've worked hard, very hard at trying to streamline those menus and making the best choices first, but you can certainly do whatever you want. So anyway, here's the favorites menu. I don't use contacts, so I'll right click on it and remove from favorites. And I don't use Conqueror, so I'll take that off the favorites. I'm going to search for my favorite text editor is Kate, the KDE Advanced Text Editor. So there it is right there. And if I right click on it, I can add to the desktop, add to the panel, or add, oh, it's already on favorites. My bad. Just a side comment. KDE Plasma has your workspaces. You can go crazy with them. And you can put applets, and by the way, your applets are called widgets in KDE Plasma, and I will show you how to add them. I tend not to add icons on the desktop because they're always covered with all the windows I have open. And I tend not to use different workspaces because obviously if you leave a lot of applications open, you use a lot of RAM. And I'm kind of old school, back when RAM was kind of scarce. So when I stop using an application, for the most part, I stop it. So anyway, here's all your applications. Comes with a full set. There may be more in here than in the default because, like I said, this is not a new installation. This is my desktop. I'm just a new user. So you'll notice that here it has some ham radio applications. You won't see those in the standard desktop, but they're available for all users on this Linux workstation. System settings is very, very, very versatile. Global theme. Here are the Breeze. Kubuntu, this is the default. This is the dark theme, the lighter theme, and you can get new themes. Let's go with highest rated first. Let's see, Sweet KDE. Let's see if we can install that. It doesn't install it, it makes it available for a choice. I'm working without a net here, folks, so we'll see how it works. While it's installing, there's a default set of icons down here in the right-hand corner on the panel. You can add them, remove them. They're all configurable. The clock, I like the clock, but I like the date on it. So I'm going to add the date and just apply it and see how that looks. That's good enough. This theme is taking forever. See what else is new. Right click on the desktop. It's got everything you would expect. Create new. Here, let me see if that works. It's nice that you can do multiple things at once in Linux. It's one of its claims to fame. So anyway, the default desktop or default panel icons down here, the clock, there are some smaller ones that are by default hidden. Notifications, updates. When you plug in a USB device, it pops it up and asks what you want to do with it. If it's got files on it, it offers to open it up with the file manager. KDE Connect, John mentioned that. I do use that. It's very handy. In fact, I'm using it more and more to transfer photos from my phone to the desktop. Okay, so we're done. Let's try applying this. Let's see what happens. Okay, now I've got a dark theme. Notice it didn't change the background, but what else did it do? Oh, use desktop layout from theme. We'll see what happens. Let's go back to default. Okay. There. So you can play like crazy in the system settings. Colors, John mentioned fonts. I feel his Pane. Here's an adjust all formats. I think that's an excellent idea. Let's change the size to say 12. And I like sans, so I'm not going to change that font. And once you're done working in a certain submenu on system settings, you can go back to the main menu here. Workspace behavior. Let me click on that. Is that what I want? Yeah, and display tooltips on mouse hover, visual feedback for status changes. The Windows default is a double click to open files and folders. I've left it here because many years ago I transitioned from Windows to Linux, and I keep it that way. Oh, desktop effects. If you remember Windows Vista, their claim to fame was special desktop effects, really cute stuff. If you had that really expensive video card, and the Linux community got all indignant and said, we can do that. And it turns out they could, and you don't need a special card for it. I don't use much of these, but I'll show you one of them. Wobbly windows. And you can change the amount of wobbliness. There you go. I don't know why anybody would want that, but you can, there are a number of them that are useful. I'll let you, desktop cube animation is cool. You put four or more desktops on a cube, and when you click Control F11 or something like that, or Control click, the cube backs out and you can rotate the cube and pick the workspace. I can't demo that on Zoom, but feel free to play with it. Screen edges. I always turn these two off because whenever I get to the screen edges, it maximizes the window I'm working on. So if I drag a window over too far, it maximizes, and that's not what I want. So I turn that off and I turn that off, but it's up to you. Touchscreen doesn't apply. Screen locking locks the default lock. You can the default lock key from the keyboard is your meta key, which I believe is the Windows key, but you can change it. I just let it time out and lock. It's just my wife and I at home, so I set the lock time up fairly high. Here's your virtual desktops. We can go, say, add 2 rows, apply it, and let's see. Bye-bye. Oh, I forgot to add another desktop. Let's add a couple more. Okay, so you can see them down here in the lower left corner. Desktop 1, 2, oh, there's 2. Oh, I don't know. Did you see the? Let me go back and let me configure. Let's add this. No, let's do this. I'm going to apply that. That background there is a painting done by my 15-year-old granddaughter. So we're kind of impressed with that. I'm going to say OK. So I'm going to go over here. Oh, wait, let's see. Virtual desktops, activities, configure desktop. There used to be a way to put a separate image on each separate wallpaper on each desktop, and I've lost where it comes from. But feel free to search. Activities are something that's very specific to KDE Plasma. The people who use them swear by them. They are virtual desktops, but they're completely independent of each other. It's different from virtual desktops. I don't use them. I have in the past, but I encourage you to play with them. So that's workspace behavior, window management, click to focus on the windows, that's default. Click raises the active window, or you can hover over a window and it'll gain the focus. Title bar actions, double click to maximize the window, or all of these other actions. Like I said, highly configurable. Inactive inner window actions. I haven't explored some of these menus in a few years, so some of these options are new to me. Movement. Oh, display the window geometry when moving or resizing. I don't think so. Let's see, window shading. Let's see, have you ever done window shading? Let's see, where is it? Let's see, how do you shade? Window shading is when you can roll up a window and all it shows is the title bar. And it's been so long since I've used it, I don't remember how to shade. And by the way, every window in KDE has a right-click menu on the taskbar that lets you move it to a different desktop, maximize it, move to a different screen, physical screen. It still seems by screen too, even though it's turned off. And more actions. You can pin it. You can, oh, I don't know, no border. That might be handy. Oh, shade. There you go.
Try rolling your mouse.
There it is. I wonder if that's all windows. I think that's just this one. Anyway, feel free to explore. If you want to start up programs, you can put them in auto start. I have a couple that I start up and I drag them in here. Here's how you do it here. You pick it and select it. Background services, don't care too much about that. These are all the things that start up automatically. These are mostly system services. Thunderbolt device monitor. There's no Thunderbolt port here, so I'm going to turn that off. Splash screen. Oh, if you've made a change, you have to apply it before you leave. Splash screen. This is the not the login screen, but the login screen's up here. This is the default. This is what I have on it. You can change it. You need to be administrator to change the login screen, the root account. That is to say, well, here, let's try it. Let's try changing it to this. Yeah, you have to put your password in. Okay, so you don't see anything because I'm not going to log out. Oh, tons of stuff here, tons of stuff here. Here's where you configure a printer, but you do have to be root to that. And notice there's already a printer here because it was already configured. Multimedia, this is where the various encoders can be controlled. Your audio. I have my headset plugged in. I could control this. That's also available down here on the microphone, or excuse me, speakers. You know, you can adjust all of them independently. There's your KDE Connect we discussed. I won't display it. Here's the two displays. If I wanted the right-hand one to go away, I'd have to unplug it, and it would go away. But it will handle any of the orientations you want. You can see them here. 90-degree clockwise, 90 upside down, 90 clockwise, and some other stuff down here. I'm going to change this screen again. I'm going to apply this one there. That's kind of pretty. This is the right-click panel. It's pretty handy. I never remember the Meta L to lock the screen, so I just right-click and click on lock screen if I do need to lock it. Over here on the application launcher, there's a thing called Leave. You can lock the screen, you can log out, you can suspend a RAM. I've got a full desktop, I never do that. You can reboot the computer or you can shut it down. If you go over here to the right-click menu, you can leave. I don't know if you can see that or not. Hope so. It says logging
Yes.
out in 25 seconds. You can change the default from logging out to shutting down, which is what I did. That's pretty handy. Let's see. Oh, down here, if you right-click on the panel, it lets you edit the panel, add the panel. Let's edit it. And let's see if I can break it. Can I drag it? Can I drag it over here? No. Let me configure it. I've got them over here on the left now, but you can in fact add a panel. It can be an empty panel, a default, Kubuntu default, or an application menu bar. I've never tried an application menu bar. Let's see what happens. Oh, there you go. Oh, and the other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to edit this panel to hide it. There's the application panel. And I think I'm going to put it up. Where did it go? Where did it go? I guess, oh, that's it there. Yeah, I could add more stuff to that. Here's your global menu. See, folks, I've been using KDE for so long, I've left it the way I like it. And I don't spend a lot of time messing around in these submenus. That's pretty obvious, but feel free to do so. The applications you'd expect are supplied with it. All the LibreOffice stuff. KDE has its own set of Office applications under a suite called Calligra, C-A-L-L-I-G-R-A. They've matured a lot recently. They're worth trying if you want to play with them. But I am so used to using LibreOffice, I don't. Discover is a software center. You could search for applications. They have featured applications. You can install them. Gcompress, if you have young kids or grandkids at home, it is a wonderful set of educational tools. They've matured steadily over the years. And by the way, almost all of the KDE applications have been compiled for Windows now. So if you find that you like Gcompress and you have a Windows laptop, you want to let the grandkids play with it, just put it on there. Applications, and you can search. There are so many there, you know, I can't even begin to count. Science and engineering, your Office apps, LaTeX editor. Oh, if you do QuickBooks at home, but you're interested in Linux, GNU Cache, which is the GNOME application, which is available for KDE Plasma, or KMyMoney, which is the native KDE app. Both of them are mature. They've added features over the years. I don't use them, but if you're interested in getting off of QuickBooks, maybe play with them. Doesn't cost anything to install them. Graphics and stuff. Also Blender, Color Paint. I use Color Paint for simple editing of images, not photos, but images. Kde is highly sophisticated, and we don't need to talk about GIMP. Everybody knows GIMP, knows about it anyway. Go back here. I want to explore, let's see, where is it? Kate. The default file manager for KDE is Dolphin. I really like it. It starts with, you know, everything in this default user's home directory, and underneath it, the default structure for a new user has all of these folders. Now, there's nothing in them, so it's not particularly useful. And you can add things to this menu and delete them to make it customizable. This remote here says network, and underneath it says photos, home, beach, orbs, graphics. Those are folders that are on the household file server. It's a Synology NAS out in the workshop on a UPS with a backup drive. And as such, I don't think I've granted access to these to the new user. Let's see. Okay, you can see that some of them are locked and some are not. Okay, these old folders, I scanned some. Okay. So I cannot enter them. So I can't do much about that. Had I had time and thought about it, I would have given permission. Let's see if there's anything in Scratch. Nope. Graphics. Oh, here we go. Oh, I might not be able to get in here. Oh, here we go. Christmas backgrounds. I used to type up a Christmas letter and put something on it. So let's assume for some reason I want to take one of these and put it in my home photo directory. I'm going to split it. And with the focus on the right-hand side, I go home. And here's pictures. And if I want to copy, say for this one over here, I drop it in pictures and it gives me the opportunity to copy. Now, if I had full privileges on the left-hand directory, I would also have an option to move it, but I'm going to copy it. And there it is. Okay, let's suppose, I have a picture in here. I guess I don't. I'm going to double click this and it will launch the image viewer. It's called GwenView. I have no idea why, but I use it for almost all my photo editing unless I actually need to change something like colors or do really sophisticated stuff. But this is great for the basic stuff. On the bottom, there's 3 tabs: folders, information about it, and operations. Under information, there's probably not much here, but if this was a photo, you'd see all the Xfce information embedded in it. You know, when the photo was taken, where the photo was taken. You can tag it with some tags for searching. Operations is what I always use all the time. Rotate right, rotate again, rotate again, rotate again. I could crop it, you know, like this. And by the way, if you're going to crop it, you could click on advanced settings and say, I want to do it 16:9, and it constrains you to cropping to that size. I'm not going to crop it. But if you find, let me get out of that. You can see at the top, this is a 1024 by 768 image. If I wanted to resize it, I click on resize, and you can give it the pixel size or resize it. When I take a photo with my phone out in the field, frequently it's far too high resolution to embed in an email or put on a website. So I'll resize it down to say 50%, and notice the keep aspect ratio is on by default, and you can resize it. Then I save it as some other name. I usually put an A or a B to indicate that the original photo has been resized. I'm going to undo that. You can mirror it. Well, you could flip it. Mirror it again. Flip it again. Also, in a photo, it has, they introduced this reduce red eye, oh gosh, 10 years ago. And initially it was, produce some pretty horrific results, but it's gotten really, really good. If you've got a photo with red eye in it, this is a great tool. You can move stuff to trash, delete it, rename it, all that good stuff. And by the way, I'm going to discard the changes. If I right click on this, you can open with any one of these editors. It recognizes it's a drawing. You can open with any of these alternates. The default is just to view it with GwenView. You can cut it, Control X, Control C, copy the location, make a duplicate here, you know, all of these good stuff. I don't even know what these are down here. Oh, you can zip it. Cool. So Dolphin is really handy. When you're done using dual panel here, you can close it, but it will close the active panel. And you can tell by the slight difference in the background highlight. So I'll close that. And again, I've still got wobbly windows on. So I'm going to, I don't use case discard, so I'm going to remove it from my favorites. And let's see, Chrome. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. What I meant to do was add it to the favorites. Stop it. Oh, there's another application. I don't think it's KDE specific. I think it's GNOME called Cheese. It's a webcam photo booth. And I don't think it may not, oh, there it goes. So what you can do is take a photo or video of yourself, like, nice. And you can add all sorts of side effects, make it historical. Oh, this photo. Let me get back out. I think I killed it. Yeah, I killed it. Okay, so if you kill something in KDE or any Linux, actually, historically, there's a Control-Alt-Escape. And I don't know, see if you can see the little skull and crossbones there. It will kill anything. Very handy. Don't use it as much as we used to. How am I doing for time, John? I could keep rambling on here, but
Well, I got something I want you to show them if you could.
Go for it. Yeah.
I was just playing with it earlier. Can you show them, if you remember, how you can change that menu to be 3 different totally looking menus?
Show me.
Oh,
Tell me.
yeah. Right click on the icon, and yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Because there's supposed to be.
Because I've been looking for something like that because I like the start menu on Windows better. By the way, there are lots of alternative application launchers. Let me we'll come back to this, John.
Yeah, because when you did that fancy theme thing, it put the third one I discovered. It has the traditional, you know, the KDE menu, then it has the traditional menu, and then it has a more like GNOME Windows 8 menu. So people.
So here are here's let me get out of this. If you right click on the panel, any panel, I guess, stop it. You see add widgets. And they're alphabetized and there are all sorts of widgets. And I think what you were talking about was application launcher.
No, actually it's under the right click and show alternatives on the icon. Yeah, the third one.
Yeah, here
that
we go.
one. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, cascading pop-up menus? No. Full screen?
Yeah,
Oh, full screen?
yeah. Check out that one.
I did play with that once. Yeah, do I like this? Can you add to favorites?
Mm-hmm.
Configure application dashboard. Oh, let me cancel out of that. Let me see. Well, let's see here. Favorites, education. Okay, let's see if I can add to favorites. Boom. Okay, I like that. Can you see that, John? All of it?
Yeah, yeah.
Good. I like this. It's probably configurable. See, you learn something new every day.
Well, and I learned from David about why to use all of the icons from your workstations, so you don't have to go to the workspaces individually. You got all the icons. Why don't we go ahead, unless there's any other big feature that you want to do, and go to open. We don't have that many questions in the chat box, but we may have people that want to pipe up and you know, share with some other questions or whatever. I'll double check with Judy. All right, Judy, I've got her converted.
Oh, stop. Do you know how long it took me to find this? I had to phrase my question correctly. Anyway, I've got some questions here. Dave Melton, member of my group. Do the file managers on all the desktops have the option to set single click? Because
Yes.
that's really what all us Windows people use instead of double click. In Cinnamon, do your desklets show on each virtual desktop? And what is the amount of resources used by each DE? So I believe that's 3 questions.
Yeah, the one click is just like in Windows. You have a choice of one click or double click, and Linux would have that. I'm going to throw over to Orv, because one of the biggest things over history was that everybody poo-pooed KDE because Xfce was the lightest resource desktop and KDE was the worst. But in 2021, that's not the case, right?
That is true. While GNOME and KDE Plasma are the nominally the most feature-packed DEs, some time ago, somebody did a comparison and found that all of the DEs are not that far apart in RAM consumption. And additionally, KDE Plasma used noticeably less than GNOME. GNOME was the heavyweight. And as far as RAM goes, you have to remember that Linux is pretty smart about using RAM. I suppose Windows is too. But when you exit a program, it doesn't throw the program out of memory if it doesn't need that memory. It keeps it in memory in case you happen to need it shortly thereafter, so it can launch it out of RAM, which speeds up performance. It uses this least recently used algorithm to throw away RAM as older programs in RAM. So, and you know, modern computers, 8 gigs is no big deal, and all of these Linux applications, all of these Linux distributions themselves, the OS itself and the DE will run nicely in 2 to 3 gigs. What you need all that extra RAM for is opening up all those 20 applications and never closing them.
Well,
Dennis,
go ahead.
did all his questions get answered, John?
I think that on the question about the desklets and stuff, I think there's an option that says show on all workstations or just on primary.
Dennis says, if I have an old laptop and get the specs written down, then is there a list somewhere online that will show me which Linux package will work with the specs of my 1,000-year-old computer? The 1,000-year-old are my words. John nodded yes.
Yep.
It's all about the RAM and CPU. If you've got 4 gigs of RAM and 25 gigs max of disk space, it'll run. The question is how fast it will run.
Yeah, and you just have to, if you know, you can go to like Distro Watch or someplace and say, you know, what is which Linux is, you know, this, you know, which one needs this much RAM, which one needs that, and then they'll give you a list of, you know, half a dozen or so. You can run any of these.
Also, you have to remember that you can get these distros that will run in just megabytes of RAM, but they require a lot of more innate knowledge. What takes up a lot of RAM is all these sexy software management packages and stuff to eliminate the need to know the nuts and bolts underneath the hood. If I mix my metaphor, sorry.
That's what I mentioned, where there are much lighter things than Xfce, and I did mention that KDE was now performed about the same, and in some cases better. But you know, things like Puppy Linux, for example, you know, if you only got 1 meg, well, less than a gigabyte of RAM, well, maybe you want to use that, but you know, they're awfully limited in comparison to these ones that we've been talking about today, which have a lot of flexibility and you know, and of course, seeing everybody else's presentation, you know, almost everything that you could do with every other one without even having to change the desktop. And for example, you can have, well, when you mentioned having it look like Windows, one of the things you can do, you can get a theme that looks exactly like Windows 10. The start menu, everything just looks exactly the same, except of course the applications that are included are different.
Yeah. And folks, we have to remember that 95% of the time, all we use a computer for is an application launcher. You know, click and launch the application. Yeah, you can tweak the desktop to your blue in the face, but for the most part, we want to just get some work done, and launching applications stably and not having them crash is, you know, 90% of the effort.
Or you can
I
go
hardly
out
do
and
it.
buy a
I mean, I should.
$299 Windows laptop on sale and use that.
How many
I
dollars?
put a Linux on it, then you'd be better off.
$199.
If you put Linux on it, sure.
Yeah, that's what I was answering his question as you guys answered it. That's my version. Mine's the easy version.
Yeah, I'm running.
You could probably go to one of the.
I'm running a 13-year-old laptop, and I'm running Linux, but I'm using the next step down from a desktop environment. It's just a Windows management. It's called Fluxbox or OpenBox, and it isn't fancy at all, but boy, it can still run after 13 years. I want to remind you that go ahead, Murray.
I was going to say, this laptop that I've got is at least 13 years old, and it's running this just fine. It's supposed to be able to have Windows 10 installed, but after the first 6 months of the preview that came out before Windows 10 was released, the first 6 months it worked, but after that, every update has failed. So I just use Linux on it. And as I say, you know, this worked just fine, and it's only got 3 gigs of memory.
Judy, one more tip for the users. If you're going to put Linux on an older machine, do yourself a favor, and before you put Linux on it, slap a cheap solid state drive in there. It'll give that machine a new lease on life.
Definitely.
If you have a question, please use the reactions button at the lower right-hand corner and click on raise your hand, and you'll go up to the upper left-hand corner so we can call on you.
I have one thing to share that came to me that's I think would be interesting, is that even though Murray was using Xubuntu with the Xfce and Orv's using Kubuntu and I'm using something else, you can start with one distro with a desktop, and you can install a different desktop in that operating system. And when you go into your login, you have a button that says, what session do you want to do? And so you can switch back and forth between Xfce and KDE, but just understand that now you have a combined one that when you select what you want to use, sets it up that way. But yeah, you can put 2 or 3 if you're crazy, and whichever day of the week it is, you can pick whichever desktop environment you want to use.
And John, if you do that, they have to remember that, like you have GNOME installed and you add KDE Plasma, then regardless of which desktop environment you're using, you have access to all of the applications from both of those DEs that are installed by default.
Right. That's
And I think KDE is coming out with something new, the Neon. I think in 2104, which comes out tomorrow, I think you have the option of using the KDE Neon, which is I don't even know how much different it is, but it's a new KDE environment.
Yeah, KDE Neon is the showcase for KDE, and it's more important for KDE than it is for Ubuntu, like Kubuntu. So it's like their showcase. It gets all the newest KDE stuff, but yet the Ubuntu base is behind. And so whereas what Orv has, he has the Ubuntu that's up to date and then brings in KDE as they see fit. So it's how do you want to look at that? Are you more concerned about the desktop environment or the operating system?
I'm calling on myself.
Oh, Judy.
Thank you. Would all distros that can be downloaded have a user manual that can be printed?
No, this is the internet. No,
Well,
seriously, just KDE has an extensive.
Printed, but
Yeah, it would be.
yeah, mine
hundreds of
manual.
pages,
Yeah,
hundreds and hundreds of pages. Yeah, it'd be huge.
But
So
you could.
one would Google, how do I use the XYZ, fill in the blank, whatever, correct?
Exactly.
And you get step-by-steps that would get you started on it and all that good kind of stuff.
Plus troubleshooting.
I'm sorry, John, but do remember Google is your best friend.
Duck, duck, go.
John.
Yes, I've
And
switched.
I usually add that every time
That's
I
safer.
say that. Another question, do we have a shell scripting group?
That's
Ooh.
that's the Orv. He's our shell guy.
Oh, I don't do that much of it because the GUI is your friend. But
There you
yeah,
go, Dave. You like the
if we-
GUI, okay?
Well, I do some bash, but honestly, I have an editor open with this script in it, and over in this other window is how I'm Googling how to write this particular bash command. But that's how you learn.
Yeah.
Over to Howard Payson. Ask your question, please. Don't forget to unmute.
I just wanted to say that I do know that Linux Mint has a user manual. I think it was on the startup page or something that it always reminded me that there are the browser page. I'm not sure for their when you open Firefox, it says there's a printable manual available for Mint. That's all.
Good.
That's good. And again, the big feature of Mint is that it is definitely user oriented, so that they're doing as much as possible to make it easy for a user, having manuals and having simplicity to it too. But it still works great. Experienced users use Mint. It's just not a beginner's Mint or beginner's Linux.
And you reminded me, John, that all of the KDE native KDE applications have a user handbook embedded in the help menu.
Bill James. Unmute.
Okay, as a Windows guy that has no issues with Windows, why would I want to convert to Linux? What would be the advantages?
Money.
Well, in the days of Windows 95, it would be easy to answer. Stability, security, and secondarily, you don't typically have to pay for applications. Generally, pretty much everything is can be had for free. Windows 10 is improved substantially. They're now to where they should have been with Windows 7, but I digress. I would say Linux could be another tool in your toolbox, either dual boot or, however you want to run it. It tends to teach you very gently about computers and networking. It's not painful at all. And there's some excellent applications. One of my primary incentives for switching over to genealogy applications in Linux was because back then I would get an annual upgrade charge from Family Tree, every year, and it got really annoying. John, you want to add anything?
Well, I was just going to say, as the other side, that's next week's workshop in genealogy, so make sure you tune into that. I think my feeling is that it's the freedom of choices and the ability to run on a variety. Windows 10 is getting very limited on how far back in the age of a computer you can run it. And so you got a number of people that are going, I can't buy a new computer. Windows 10's not running. What do I do? Convert it to Linux and you've got a computer running. I think that's mine. Murray?
I think that mainly it's, for me, it's, I think there's a lot more choice in what you can do. The cost is certainly a very important factor. I do use Windows and I do have Macs with Mac iOS too. I think the biggest thing is both Windows and Mac are very bad for planned obsolescence. And they also tend to be more bloated. And I find that it's a really, really annoying that Windows is, you have to reboot so often to install the updates. Right now on my Windows machine, it's waiting for me to do a reboot because it's done the latest update on Tuesday or something like that. And you have to do that once in a while with Linux, but it's nowhere near as often. Another thing that's really a big advantage with Linux, and this is a tremendous advantage, Mac comes close to it, but not quite. That is that your updates, you don't have to update each piece of software independently. On Windows, you have to check, oh, LibreOffice, oh yeah, it's got to be updated now. Oh yeah, Acrobat, Adobe Acrobat has to be updated. Whereas on Linux, when it keeps track of what needs to be updated and it updates any or all of your software that's to be updated without you having to go through and do those things independently. Another thing is that if you do have some kind of disaster, and I accidentally wiped out my hard drive once, and I was able to recover it quite completely. If you have to do a reinstall of Windows, it is so painful to have to get back all your programs that it isn't funny. Whereas because of the way they have the registry and everything, you can't just save your files. You've got to have a clone or something like that. Oh, just a second. So that's my biggest advantage.
Dennis, unmute.
Yeah, I apologize if this was already addressed, but I missed a big part of the presentation here because I had to take my brother for a doctor's appointment. But my question is, for all the different distributions, do you need or can you find, like virus protection or, software for
Yeah, well, go ahead, Orv.
Yeah. Well, Windows was written as a single user entity before the internet came about, and really there was no concept of security. Linux grew up on the internet as a multi-user system, and security was pretty much baked in. As a result, you don't generally need antivirus software or something for malware. For instance,
Take that one.
I have a user account, which I log in with, but it has no administrative privileges. I can't go see somebody else's applications. I can't go into the OS areas. Let's assume back in the old days, Windows, you'd get an email with an attachment and you'd innocently click on it and it would launch and go off and do bad things. Files in Linux are not automatically executable. You have to tell the operating system, this isn't executable. So under Linux, in order to damage your computer with an email attachment, you'd have to save it, tell the computer it's executable, run it, and you'd be running it as yourself, your non-privileged user. And let's assume it tried to do something nefarious like wipe out some operating system directory. It has no privileges there because it's running as you. The operating system will see that attempt and boot it out of memory. So right there, you're way more secure.
When you say it'll try to boot it as me, does that mean I would have created on my Linux system an administrative level user and then me as below that, not administrative?
That's correct. That's the default install. Now, some of these programs will give you administrative privileges, but if some of the distributions, but if you try and run a program that requires administrative privileges, it will require you to put in your password again to verify it's really you. It's fairly secure.
Yeah, and different than the Windows, where you would have to do a admin user and a standard user. With the Linux, you're created with two hats. You hardly ever wear the one hat, but very easily you can switch hats when you need to. So, you know, when I create my user, I'm a regular user, but I get to have admin rights very easy. Similar to what Windows does, that if you're a standard user, it'll pop up and say, you've got to put in an administrative password to do this.
Yeah.
But
I might add that.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I'll say, but too many people run all the time as a full administrator, and that's where Windows people get into trouble.
So besides email, the same would apply if I was on a website and clicked on a link in a website, same thing would apply.
Pretty much, yeah. If it downloaded an executable and told it to run it, it would try and run as you. Now, it's not executable by default. And the worst you could do would be make it executable. And if it ran rampant, it would only destroy your personal files, not anything in the computer. I mean, it takes a lot of effort to get damaged by a virus on a Linux computer. You have to do multiple stupid things in a row.
Okay,
Judy?
final question. So if I go down to the basement and pull out the old Packard Bell, will it work?
Depends. How old is it?
Probably.
How much RAM does it have is the big thing.
I don't know, but I'm thinking 1990 or something, 92. I don't know.
If you can cram,
Probably it would.
If you can cram enough RAM in it, you know, minimum several gigs. Oh, by the way, if it has an IDE drive in it, just go prop a door open with it. You know, it's not worth anything else. But if it has a SATA drive in it, do yourself a favor and put a little cheap SSD in it. Make your computer seem to run so much faster. Yep. I don't have any rotating drives on any computers in my house now, except the file server. They've gotten so cheap and so fast. You're abusing yourself if you're still using a rotating drive in a desktop machine.
Judy,
Except in my case, I've got so many terabytes of memory that I couldn't afford to have that all SSD.
go ahead,
Well,
Judy.
And don't forget, Dennis, that $299 Windows computer you can buy and turn it into a Linux computer. And it will probably have a very small SSD.
And you
Windows
could probably,
people, if you need to update your other software other than the Windows stuff, Patch My PC is an absolutely excellent program that works in the background, and it has over 300 apps to choose from. And I only have a half a dozen that it keeps track of. John Carter says he uses Sophos for Linux as he thinks it's the best antivirus and malware app around. And announcement, the Central Florida Computer Society is starting a Linux SIG. Not too shabby, and I'm going to recommend to Mike that he get in contact with John. I've already talked to Huey about it, Huey Poplock, and mentioned Columbus and Equituk and stuff like that. So it is growing, Mr. Kennedy. So there. Over to Murray.
okay, I'm going to say probably at one of your local computer shops, you could buy a refurbished PC for $100 that would run Linux perfectly fine.
I've been running Linux for a long time, and in spite of Linux being very efficient with hardware, you do eventually have to upgrade. And every half decade or so, I go out and buy a 5 or 6 year old Dell Optiplex and just move the drive over, because Linux will wake up, boot up, and say, "Oh, new hardware, no big deal." And that's like a $200 machine, and it's a rocket.
I'd like to thank my co-hosts and David in Australia, who's probably getting up about now, for sharing with us on this. We will be back next month with another learning Linux workshop. We'll send you the details of the topics when we work that out. And Judy has a final comment.
We're trying to think of more workshops to offer. And we don't get any help hardly from anybody, which always amazes me, because if you know me, you know I always have something to say and request or offer or whatever. I would like to have one on contrasting and comparing Word, online Word, Google Docs, and Writer. And of course, I need 4 people to show us a brief demo of all of those programs, because so many people, when it comes to $70 a year for 365, they go, not me, but they don't know about any of the other things. And I could easily use Writer and the spreadsheet program. I could use Docs and their spreadsheet program, but I couldn't use the Docs or LibreOffice PowerPoint programs, because they don't make any sense to me.
Sorry.
And they don't offer what I need for PowerPoint. So if anybody uses Writer and they would like to volunteer to give us a short demo on it, or you happen to use Google Docs as an alternative, or you're just all couch potatoes and you don't volunteer for anything with APCUG or your group, then I don't understand that, because I've been doing this for 30 years as a volunteer. So think about it. You know my email address, because you get a gazillion emails from me. If you can think of other specific Linux workshops. See, John doesn't, count those as Linux workshops, really. I do, but he doesn't. And I would also like to compare Photoshop and the Linux program, GIMP, and another one of a moderately priced one, so to speak, other than Photoshop, just so people can see what the options are out there. And, I think it'll be interesting, because we're all here to educate, because if you're a nonprofit, that's something you have to do to get your nonprofit status and keep your nonprofit status. Dale wants to know how to do questions. You click on the chat box bubble and you type your question in to me and press the enter key and off you go. I click on the 3 dots and I download the text file of the Q&A plus all that stuff that Orv answered and send it out to everybody along with the video and Murray's presentation. I'm off my soapbox now.
And I'd like to remind everyone that next week we have a Wednesday workshop on genealogy where we will be showing different options of keeping track of your family history. Or we'll be back talking about Gramps, and we have a couple other people. And 3 days after that is our big spring VTC. We've got 6 good presentations again. Registration is open now and people are getting registered. So we've got that. By the first of the month, we will send out anything about any other workshops in wow, May already. Judy.
And with the VTC registration, you will see I have added some things. I get the strangest things. People think their street address is their email address or their name is their computer club name. And so at the bottom, I have a checkbox, yes or no. Did you go over everything and make sure all the information is correct? I was hoping people would take a second look. And I also have beware of autofill. And you know, I cannot tell you how many registrations I have received with that yes box checked and the wrong information somewhere, which means I have to contact them, wait till they let me know what user group or computer club they belong to. And if it's their street address in the email address, I get in touch with somebody else in the group that is attending the event, or I contact the president and ask them to, you know, send me the real email address. So I really not like to have to do that, but that's okay. I realize, you know, we're all busy, but we need to pay attention, even though we're seniors and we've been there, done that 1,000 times. We still need to pay attention when we're filling in information. Really off my soapbox now.
Okay. All right. Thank everybody for attending. I'm really excited when Judy, when she and I first talked about it, we thought, well, maybe we might do one or something. And here we are, number 8, I guess, or 7 or 8.
Going on to 8.
And hopefully this has been beneficial to everybody. And some of you are going to take a look at it and think about being a Linux person too.